So here's the problem with it though. So he's not only targeting the BDS organization, such as there is
Yeah.
such a thing, but he's targeting any organization that takes any type of economic protest, right? So let's say there's just an organization who may not identify 100% with the leadership of BDS. They may not
Right.
even agree with the overarching goals of
Yeah.
BDS, but they agree that something should be done about the perceived and actual human rights violations that take
Sure.
place. So now they are potentially going to be put on this. I can't even believe that he fixed his mind and his mouth and his pen to write that we're going to make essentially a blacklist. And anyone
Yeah.
who takes any economic actions in protest against Israel is going to be put on this blacklist. So I mean, where does he
Again,
draw that line between
well,
just an economic protest?
Well, I mean, again, the irony is pretty thick in that one of the strongest critiques of BDS is that it associates all Israelis and puts them into one basket, right? Doesn't differentiate between Israelis who are anti-occupation and Israelis who are pro-occupation. It doesn't make these kinds of distinctions. And as you point out, if you really wants to go through and find anybody who has any association with BDS whatsoever, he's making a similar or maybe almost the exact same mistake or jump or sort of guilt by association. There's no question that you're not going to be able to tease out which people follow
Right.
all of the BDS elements. Do they follow the parts that he finds problematic versus the parts that he doesn't find problematic? You're absolutely right. How does he get away with it is a political question. It's not a logical question, and that might be part of the problem. I'm trying to sort of work through it logically. I think there is some logic to some of the critiques of BDS that he's putting into this, but overall, it's not a logical decision. It's a political decision, and it's best understood through some of the foundational research that's been done on this area. There's a book by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt called The Israel Lobby. In many ways, it's been proven wrong and a little bit out of date. The Iran deal really threw a wrench into their thesis, but the major principle of the Israel Lobby, and it's just one part of the book, but it's the most important part, is that there tends to be no political cost for attacking the pro-Palestinian side of things.
Yeah.
So there is a political benefit. And again, this is, if you read The Israel Lobby, it's a nuanced book to the extent that it wants to be clear that it doesn't think advocating for Israel is a problem. It thinks that the imbalance comes from the fact that there is nothing pushing back in the other direction.
And
so
let me jump in there because we saw that even with Hillary Clinton's speech at AIPAC, right? She went full-throated, pro-Israel Netanyahu, essentially hand in hand with
pro-Israeli government policy at the moment. There are many of us,
Right.
myself included, who feel that this is directly against the long-term interests of Israel, and would say that Cuomo's supposed protection of Israel is actually one of the worst things you can do for it. Right. But your point's well taken.
Yeah, no, definitely, because and this is where I was going to go with Hillary Clinton is essentially is that she threw under the bus any left-leaning progressive voices from Israel, right? And in her unfettered support for Netanyahu, and in a lot of ways, Cuomo has done the exact same thing. So I agree with you in the sense that no matter where you fall on this, if you can be pro-Israel and still feel like these type of tactics undermine the long-term best interest of Israel, because in a very rich conversation that I would want to have, but we're going to have it another time, about how our actions and our aggression can undermine us in the long run. But most people really can't delve over into that manner of thinking. A lot of people just think if we just are strong armed and we throw down the hammer, then that strengthens us. But in actuality, it doesn't. And when I say us, I'm talking about any group, whether you're just American or African American or any other group. Every strong arm tactic is not in your best interest. And this is something that Cuomo has done. He's just full-throated, gone against everybody, a blanket covering of anyone who boycotts. I want to see how they're going to actually execute this, because the constitutionality of something like this definitely comes into question in my mind. I don't see how he actually gets away with this legally, because he he's using the force of the government and the coffers of the government to essentially silence political dissent. What do you think about that, and where do you fall on that?
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not a legal scholar. From what I read, it seems extremely questionable. But I think that the fact that it's questionable tells us a lot. Tells us that he doesn't have to enact it.
Yeah.
To my reading, what he's trying to get out of this is not actually to defend Israel. And like I said before, I think this would be a very foolish way to try to do that anyway. What he's doing is getting his bona fides out there, right? He is taking a political lane. I mean, it becomes touchy, but you know, he's governor of New York, right? The Jewish vote matters tremendously to him. There are, of course, there is, and you're speaking to one of them, a large portion of the Jewish community who looks at this and is appalled. But it will generally not cost him any votes amongst the Jewish population, and it will gain him some, right? It has to do with there's very little pushback, right? So the extent to which it's going to happen is almost, I would say it's irrelevant, partly because I think you're right, that I don't think he will execute it. But what he's doing here is making a clear statement, and he's taking a lane, right? So Cuomo wants to be a Democrat. You're in New York, you've got to be a Democrat, right? I mean, not strictly speaking, but you basically have to be a Democrat. But you need a lane, right? And his lane is that sort of conservative Democrat lane.
Got it.
Which you were talking about Clinton at AIPAC. It's a similar lane to that. In New York, it's particularly useful to get in that lane on Israel issues because, again, there is such strong support for Israel and very little pushback in the other direction. And so I think he wants to get this down, right, to have this on his list of qualifications as he moves forward. I think that, there's very little question that he eventually wants to run for president. And I think he thinks this helps.
Yeah, I love what you said there, that he doesn't even have to enact this at this point, right? It's something that he could just float out, sign it into law, and never follow up on it again because he gets the political benefit without the political consequences, which speaks to the book that you mentioned, right? That there quite literally is no political consequence for attacking the pro-Palestinian side of the debate, and there seems to be nothing but pure benefit.